So today's February 7th in the morning, and I'm sitting here with Barry Morishita. Did I say that correct?
You did, yes.
Well, thank you again for coming here today. We're going to be talking a little bit about the current state of the Alberta politics, economics, healthcare, things like that. I think we can jump right into it. Do you mind just telling me a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I come from a municipal background, born and raised in southern Alberta. I was a municipal politician for 16 years. In that 16 years, I was mayor for just about six. And as well, I have a provincial background. I was on the board of directors for what was then the Alberta Urban Municipalities Association,
Mm-hmm.
and I was president for 4 years. And I got to tour the entire province. So communities are my thing. I've nearly 260 members that I visited over a 4 year period, and it's a great experience. I recommend if people are interested in politics, municipal politics is a real good place to start.
You know, I almost ran for mayor this past election in Fort Saskatchewan.
Oh, there you
Just
go.
throw my name in there.
Yeah, you know what? It's a really good experience, and it's the most impactful level of government you can be a part of.
Yeah.
And it kind of leads to why I got into provincial politics, because I felt honestly one of the problems that we have at the municipal level is that there's just the province controls too much. They don't give enough authority to municipalities. They don't collaborate enough with them, and that results in a lot of inefficiencies and a lot of problems lingering for a long time.
Yeah, I especially know what you mean, especially when it comes to healthcare. I think that I can speak a little bit about my experience working in small rural communities and the dramatic state of affairs that we're in.
Yeah.
So a lot of these rural facilities, I don't think people realize this. We're on the verge of a breaking point. There's very short staffed,
Yep.
generally small teams of 10 people all working 7 days a week, being called to work every day they're not working, and it's led to a substantial amount of service reductions in our province.
Absolutely.
I know a mayor of a small community. I won't name her. She's the mayor of the county, not the town.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this hospital has a 50% reduction in services. It's been about 8 months now. And there is no action from the provincial government to coordinate with herself to be able to make incentives for nurses, physicians, to be able to go and work there permanently.
Yeah.
And so I spoke with her and I was talking to her about some ideas. And one big thing is there needs to be housing.
Yeah.
Because if you look at myself, if I'm coming fresh out of nursing school, I got no place to live.
No.
I'm not going to move 500 kilometers outside of a city to rent a house that's probably $1,500-$1,600 a month.
Yep.
And then, just
Yeah, and I think there's all kinds of things that if you don't coordinate those kinds of things, and I know some communities just like that. It's not a uncommon story. It's a pretty common story.
yeah,
You have situations where the working conditions themselves, that you spoke about them, are so onerous. Like you said, called in when you're not scheduled, asked to stay longer when because of the workload or the emergency load or whatever's going on. And how can you sell a package? So I've been involved in doctor recruitment in my municipal life. That was something we did every year for every 16 years I was on council. Doctor recruitment was a thing because, we're a place of 15,000. We have facilities and things, and we still struggled. And that's a systemic problem across that. But you can't do it unless you do it together. People choose to live places for more reasons than just their profession.
yeah,
They choose those places for more reason than just the wage. You can't pay people enough to be in a miserable situation or a tough situation or one that doesn't suit their family. So, the fact that they aren't with us on this, we're not walking hand in hand, is a terrible thing, actually.
yeah, it is. So you made a post on LinkedIn that you were going to try to tackle this shortage in a way by increasing the seats in the colleges and universities to graduate more healthcare professionals. So to me, that's obvious. And this physician shortage, nursing shortage, it's not new.
No, 20 years minimum. Like I said, 16 years of municipal, and that was 25 years when we were looking for doctors then.
So what the hell?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's flabbergasting because it is such an obvious answer. It's such an obvious solution that would have dramatically made a difference. And we're still sitting here and nothing's happening.
Nope.
Is there a reason that you know of why they just can't do this? Why this isn't happening?
I don't know. I think it comes down to money. It costs money to create spaces in universities. You have to in Alberta, although the tradition seems to be quickly changing, that you invest in education, you invest in post-secondary education, so we subsidize it, and that seems to be going away. Seem to be making it harder for students to take that on. I was door knocking in the by-election here a few months ago, and I ran across a nursing student who was a brilliant kid in school and is very well suited to be a nurse. That was interesting. I was talking to her mother and her at the same time, which is really interesting. She's a real people person, has incredible talents other than just the technical science of a nurse.
Yeah.
94% average to get in, interviews and paperwork, and a struggle. And she said, the thing that discouraged her about becoming a nurse, because she's always wanted to be one, was the burden of getting into nursing school. Yeah. And so she was ready to quit several times before she even stepped across the threshold. Yeah. Very discouraging. So, get back to your question, I don't know why, but I think it comes down to the priorities of the government, and the priorities of the last 10 years in particular and beyond, because this is a crisis that's been looming for a long time. They just didn't want to invest the money. It was going to be expensive. You cannot get to the place where we have enough family doctors, where we have enough allied health professionals without making upfront investments. We brag all the time in Alberta about how we're growing and importing people and babies are being born and school kids are there, except we don't have any services for them, right? Yeah. We just have that one line. Look at all, we had 32,000 people join the province. Okay, well, where's the schools? Where's the doctors? Where's the nurses to look after those 32,000? Gets left behind. And if you can find out what the answer to that question, that would be awesome. But somebody told me the best time to fix a problem would have been yesterday, and the next day is today. We're still where we are. And the Alberta Party is saying, we know that's not a magic bullet today, but this is not a crisis that's going to get better. It's one that's going to get worse.
I think in terms of like provincial politics, there's 4-year terms. So a lot of their goals are short-sighted goals because they want to, now this is coming from a guy who's outside of provincial politics, so you can correct me please if I'm wrong. But when they get into office, they want to do something that is realizable in those 4 years. So we don't get a lot of those long-term goals. So I've also worked as a nurse in Quebec. I can tell you that they have a phenomenal primary care system. But it was not out of work that was done over 4 years.
Yeah.
It was a long-term action plan that came out of decades of work. So this, like you said, increasing spots in colleges, it's not going to pay off next year.
No.
Can we bring in 500 nurses internationally within 6 months? Yeah, we can, right? But what about the people here, right? Yeah. What about, like you said, 94% average to get into a nursing program? Makes no sense.
It doesn't. But that's the lack of spaces dictate the price of admission, and that's not right. What the provincial government, and I agree that that's what the mindset of a provincial governing party seems to be, is that we've got to post some wins here, guys.
Yeah.
So it looks like we're doing something. the last announcement on EMS in my a total joke. In terms of actually making any difference, because it's not going to really make any difference. In fact, now we hear the stories about how they're already offsetting calls, and we've heard a couple of stories here in Alberta in the last week about people getting pushed off to 811 already because somebody heard a press conference and said, oh, we can do that now. That we're not really tackling the problem. And what's really upsetting for me, as an Albertan, born and bred here in this province, I love this place, and I think the potential of it is amazing. They don't give people enough credit for being smart. You know what? I understand. If you explain to me, hey, I'm going to double the spaces, that means, that maybe, hopefully your kids are going to have access to a family doctor and they're not going to be in the stress situation you're in. It's going to take us a while. They understand that. They actually do. But politicians, for some reason, don't. If they don't see their name in the news or they don't see their poll number going up because they made some podium announcement on something, they think they haven't done it right. But, I trust Albertans to make good judgments based on good information. And I think, for some reason, politicians have forgotten all about that.
Yeah.
And I think we need to do politics differently. To your point about long term, people understand that. They make those choices every day in their own lives about investments, whether to buy a house, whether to live somewhere else. They do that with thoughtfulness and consideration, and then politicians think, well, no, they don't. And it's insulting, to be honest.
So 811, pushing 911 calls to 811. I couldn't believe it.
I don't either.
When I read that,
Yeah.
first the news article, I don't know, but the state of the state of news companies like Global News, especially, the reporting is just atrocious in my opinion. Global News, like a 500-word article, tells you nothing. But the article was terrible. Like the headline told you nothing about the actual program.
Yeah.
It said pushing EMS calls to nurses. What does that mean?
Yeah.
So they're gonna have people who call 911 who want to care.
Yes.
And they're going to push them to an 811 to a nurse that walks you through dozens of questions. Of course, there's initial questions, chest pain, shortness of breath, that would be automatically filtered back to EMS.
Yeah.
But people know if they're calling 911, they know what 811 is.
Yes.
And I just hope no one gets hurt.
Yeah, I agree with you. And again, these signals, see, and they don't really think about it. So they stand at the podium and say, we're going to divert 40,000 calls away from EMS. I think that was the number, up to 40,000. And I'm thinking to themselves, okay, that's great. So some guy walks away, or some person walks away from that press conference and goes, oh, that's such a smart thing to do, until they're the ones calling 911. Yeah. And they don't think about that, right? They want to make the podium statement, we're so smart. But we don't go back and say, hey, how does this affect anybody?
Yeah.
They just don't. And it's frustrating because the answers in my mind are all there. Yeah. They have been there for years. They just have not acted on it. They just released a report on healthcare and mental health. And in 2015, David Swan was in the legislature, and he was chairing a committee. Had a whole bunch of recommendations on that. I was just going through them here a few days ago just to see, because it seems we're doing another one, or why are we doing another one? We haven't even acted on any of the ones from 2015 when the NDP was in power. So it's this mindset again of trust Albertans. When you do something good, that you make some progress, they will reward you because you've done that. But it seems if we just want to make announcements, we don't care about the outcome. And I've seen it time and time again.
So I think I want to name drop Danielle Smith here. Okay. Did you get the pamphlet about the healthcare reform in the mail?
I don't know if I have yet. No.
Anyways, or same thing on the website.
Okay, yeah.
We're going to make healthcare reform.
Yeah.
Okay, and?
Yep.
Are you in high school? Is that the limit of your ability to produce a plan of action when you're in the highest level of government in a province?
Remember, she originally said it was only going to take her 90 days to fix this. She said 90-day action plan was going to be there. It was going to change things.
Action plan, I think it's one sentence.
Yeah.
I think her action plan is one sentence. Frustrating. For the highest level of government to be able to produce that little detail.
But it's a beautiful ad, isn't it? It's a beautiful ad, and it's on a nice shiny piece of cardboard, and you're paying for that because that is the priority of this government. It's the priority of the last government. It's been the priority of governments for a while.
Now, I will say, though, I want to ask you kind of from your party perspective. Now that she's talking about healthcare reform, specifically about adding private healthcare. So again, she hasn't expressed how she does that. Now, most people, when they think, okay, private healthcare, and I've asked my friends' family about this, they think we're going to have a two-tier system.
Right.
So what that means is that they're going to have end consumers pay up front for costs not covered.
Right.
My idea of a private healthcare is that we're going to have private businesses charge the government for services that can be done more efficiently than the government can do.
Right.
So kind of like, where do you stand? Where's the Alberta Party stand in terms of privatization?
Okay, so we always use these buzzwords, right? These privatization of healthcare, because it elicits an emotional response. And nobody wants the first part of privatization, which is that you have to pay out of pocket to get the work done. Mm-hmm. No, we don't. But we also think you have to be practical and pragmatic about it. We have my mom, for as an example, had cataract surgery here a year or two ago, right? That was done in a so-called private clinic, but every doctor is a private enterprise, and so it's who pays for it at the end of the day, and so it's access and who pays for it. And I am in favor of any initiative that allows me to go into get a service done that I'm paying for through my taxation and through the budget to healthcare, and that speeds up the time for me to get that service.
Yeah.
There's a lot to say about efficiency of some consistent services. I mean, I've talked to doctors who have run hospitals about lab services, and you have the NDP wanted to make sure absolutely had to be public. No matter what you did, had to be publicly run, publicly owned, publicly administered. And then you get the UCP who says you got to be privatized no matter what, everything. And when I talk to an administrator at a big hospital here in Alberta about it, they say, we need both.
Absolutely.
The efficiency of you and I going in and getting our annual physical at my age, definitely have to get it annually.
Yeah.
So you go in and you get that done, and if you wait a few weeks for the results, it's pretty no problem. But if I go into the cancer center and I've got a stage 3 or 4 issue, I need results now, and I need the cutting edge stuff, right? I don't need the basic stuff. So he said you need both. You need access to both. Except we can't see the practicality of that solution. And I think so when it comes to an outside entity with a different name on their board doing hip surgeries or cataract surgeries or those kinds of things, and they're really good at it and they're really efficient at it, and we can afford it from a perspective that we're not getting ripped off by that system, then why aren't we doing it? It makes no sense to me not to pursue those initiatives.
I like what you mentioned there when like every physician is a contractor, and a lot of people say, oh, we have a public healthcare system in Alberta. And what I like to say is no, we have a publicly funded private healthcare system.
Yeah.
Like you said, the NDP want everything publicized, especially like the laboratory services. And, it is so difficult though. I did try to start a nursing business. Okay. I wanted to do IV antibiotics.
Okay.
Very simple.
Okay.
IV antibiotics routinely are done through emergency rooms.
Okay.
Especially in rural areas.
Right.
Very expensive to run a patient through an emergency room to get an IV antibiotic.
Mm-hmm.
So you could create a private clinic pretty cheap, and I bet you I could do it for 25% or less of the cost the Alberta government is doing currently, but there's no way to get paid.
Yeah, that's a problem for sure.
So I've been waiting for Danielle Smith to release this action plan on reform. How is she going to incorporate, like you said, outside entities, private corporations, implementing them or incorporating them into our healthcare system? Yeah. And the only thing she's got so for us like 5,000 knee and hip surgeries in Calgary.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Again, mind-boggling. How many staff work in there?
No.
How many people are thinking about this type of stuff?
Yeah. And I think one of the things about this whole conversation about private versus public and who's worried about what, and is my line going to get bigger? We hear the arguments about resources, and I think that's a very real argument. I think resources are scarce, and I think we have to be careful about that we don't migrate a lot of services away from especially urgent care, because urgent care obviously something AHS they really do very well. Urgent care itself and acute care, I think they do those well, but if they were to lose resources, I think that'd be a problem. So we have to be thoughtful about it, but I think we have to tell Albertans what actually we're talking about, right? Like, it's great to say, we're going to add 30,000 surgeries a year or 10,000 surgeries a year. That's going to move you along the list. Explain it a little bit more to us, please. How are the contracts let out? Are they getting paid? Like, what is the service cost in a hospital versus this different building? How does that work? And help us to understand that. Take us through it. That takes a little more time and effort, and maybe it's not as instantly newsworthy. But I can tell you what, in the long-term scheme of things, you get a better understanding. The electorate, the people of Alberta, understand what's going on. They accept. They have to decide if they accept that solution for the problem that they think they're facing. And if we're doing a good job, we're paying attention to what people are saying, I think that's what ends up happening. But certain political leaders love to create that division, that I'm on this side of the fence and you're on that side of the fence, and that allows them, because in Alberta we only need 40% to win a majority government. So really 6 out of 10 of us, they don't even care if you like them or not. They only want the 4 out of the 10 to like them. And so they can say these statements in a certain way to create that situation for themselves. And It's maybe good politics in the sense of you get to win, but it's really bad governing, and it's really bad for the future of the province.
Yeah. Division. I think that segues really nicely into another topic. But first, I want to ask you a point blank question.
Sure.
Nurse practitioners.
Yeah, I think there should be a way for them to be able to do it. I've seen clinics operating underneath in PCNs. I know of one situation up north that was actually getting paid. I think there's a great value to them in a team system of approach, how you approach these based on the resources around you. And just to illustrate that for you, in communities across this province, you have 10,000 people to deal with, right? And you have these issues. When communities look around to solve a problem, they don't get to pay for expertise to come in and fix it. They take what they have and they leverage it to the max degree. We have all of these nurse practitioners who have a scope of practice that would create a lot of situations, particularly in family care,
Yeah.
pre-emergent care, whatever you want to call it, preventative care,
Yeah.
maintenance. I'm not sure what
Primary
care.
Yeah.
Create some capacity. They're trained to do it.
Yeah.
Their scope of practice is well defined, and yet we are unwilling. And again, whether it's a doctor saying no, it's whether it's the college or whoever's arguing about these
AMA.
spaces, whoever there's spaces that they're worried about. Yeah. The fact is that we need to get in a room and look. The AMA, the nurses, the other allied health professionals, the government, the hospital administrators, they exist for one purpose: to deliver health care to a patient. They keep talking that it's patient-centered care, but when they have the actual conversation, they revert back to protecting their own territory. This is not acceptable, and we have a government that's led them to think that your territory will be protected. And that is, again, stick to your goal. Your goal is to drive people out of the system, to get them away from emergent care, to make sure they're well taken care of, and take the stress off the system. But they keep answering to going back to whether they've promised it, whether they've said, hey, don't worry about it, we're not going to do this, so don't worry about what we're going to, it's ridiculous. We need to get in a room and fix the problem. And I would defy anybody who is just a regular person in their context of being a community person who wants their quality of life to be better, whether you're a doctor, nurse practitioner, if you got in a room and said, hey, what's the best way to provide health care for our community, the model would be a lot better.
Yeah.
But we won't do it. So I don't know why, again.
You said, so again, the biggest problem is getting paid. Nurse practitioners cannot bill for services. They have to be employed by AHS.
Yeah.
Or under direct supervision of a physician.
Yes.
Because the physician can bill. But a primary care clinic's not going to hire an NP, take money out of their bottom line for services that they can't bill for. So nurse practitioners need to be able to bill for services to build infrastructure in our primary care system to serve more people. Yeah. The president of AMA had written a letter saying he doesn't want to further silo health professionals into different areas. It says nurse practitioners have their place, but in a team. So he wants them always in a team environment with physicians, but that's highly limiting to enabling them to create this infrastructure.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Especially when it comes to private practice, not like the government's handing out, okay, we're going to give Sherwood Park $5 million. We're going to open up a clinic, have a physician, 10 nurse practitioners, make it family practice. Yeah. That's not going to happen. Too complicated. So if a nurse practitioner can bill, they can go get a lease on a building, operate very similar to a family practice. Yeah. And the physician won't have to be there taking money out of their bottom line to pay them a salary. Right. So what's your opinion on implementing or making sure that nurse practitioners specifically can bill AMA so that they can develop these private practices?
Yeah, no, I think it has a lot of potential. Like I said, I was in a small community where I saw a nurse practitioner was doing that very same thing. Now, I'm not sure the model of how she was getting paid. It slips my mind exactly how that worked. Yeah. But she was essentially, walk in the door, and her office was right in the city or the town hall or the village office or whatever. Yeah. And they had, the whole clinical space set up. Not sure exactly how she was being paid, but she was being paid for services rendered, just like a doctor would. So the potential is there. And when I refer to team, I don't mean team that there's a hierarchy,
Okay.
but that there's an actual approach to presenting the issues in a community. So for me, the way I look at what a team approach is and how I've kind of in my own community, how I've talked to some of the doctors about it, is that you have 10,000 people without a family doctor. So what does that mean? So that means roughly, on a patient panel, whatever you want to call it, roughly 1,000 people, give or take 800 to 1,000 is kind of a bit of a norm. They seem to be, it's not perfectly ideal, but it seems to be manageable.
Mm-hmm.
So then basically you need 10 bodies to take care of those 10,000 people. Yeah. Now, do those 10 bodies all have to be MDs? In my mind, a team approach is, hey, you know what? We have 5 nurse practitioners here. We could use those 5 nurses. How do we implement them within our whole system? Yeah. And if payment is the problem, but I don't know if that's the only problem, but if the payment is a problem, then we should be working on that. Because at the end of the day, again, we have to drive the solution for the communities. We have to drive a solution for those patients. And to me, a team approach is, hey, we have 21 doctors, they can do this much. We have 5 nurse practitioners, they can do this much. We have RNs and PCNs and LPNs. How much can they do? Can our system support this? Mm-hmm. What do we need, right? Instead of isolating them and saying, well, you can't do really the scope of practice because you can't get paid.
Yeah.
That seems to me a technical issue, although it's become a political issue.
100%
right?
A political issue.
And it should be a technical issue. Yeah. We're supposed to be delivering a service here for a patient. We keep saying that's what AHS keeps saying to us. That's what the province keeps saying to us. That's not the case. We have way more political consideration in healthcare than we do practical consideration. And the Alberta Party wants to change that. And I'm willing to take the flack for it because at the end of the day, we need to stay true to our mission, which is to provide services for Albertans who are paying taxes for those services. And everything else has to be moved around and build some collaboration and consensus. But at the end of the day, whoever has the authority has to eventually say, hey, you know what, we got to move forward. Let's give this a try. The worst thing that can happen is you make an error, or you don't get it quite right.
Yeah.
And then guess what? Be smart and brave enough to walk it back and go the other way. There's a whole bunch of options here. And standing still is not one of them, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah, 100%. It's such a highly politicized issue for absolutely no reason. And you could probably say definitely that the Alberta government does not seem to be focused on just delivering that mission of providing care to its citizens.
No, they want to keep people in line. They want to keep people voting for them. So that's the primary consideration. They don't want to deal with noise in election from whoever because there's a solution that doesn't quite fit their personal self-interest. The fact is, again, what is our goal? Our goal is to provide healthcare for people, and we should be doing everything we can as the overarching governing body in this province to do that. And too much political consideration means we do too little, period. Yeah. And that's really unfortunate.
Yeah, I think you mentioned division. I want to segue into that, especially division with healthcare politics, COVID UCIsolations, mandating people to stay home, lockdowns.
Yep.
That became very like UCP versus NDP. NDP pro lockdown, UCP no lockdowns. That became a huge reason for people to go and cast their vote because they're so polarized. These people are polarized. They either pro lockdown or they don't want to see a lockdown ever again. Yeah. And when they went to the ballots, they knew that voting for, or they will know in the future, 7 months from now, based off of how Danielle Smith has, said in her press conferences, there will be no more lockdowns. We will not ask you to wear a mask in public versus the NDP pro lockdowns, and we'll let you wear a mask. So in that interview that I was referring to that was on YouTube, you guys were saying that it's difficult because you guys are saying you want to have this community-based kind of decentralized approach, like really again, what do the citizens want? But I think for myself as a voter, that is such a polarized issue. I want to know if I vote for you, please, no more COVID. This hopefully stays under control.
Yeah.
But if some other bug comes around or if COVID mutates and gets worse again, what is the Alberta Party going to do in terms of lockdowns, mask mandations, and things like that? That's going to affect our lives, the lives of small business owners and things like that? What are you going to do?
So I can only go by experience, and I'll take a little bit of time to answer it. So first of all, I don't think we should be making political decisions about a lockdown, like or a mandatory lockdown, or that we're going to make sure everybody does this or everybody does that.
Okay.
You know what? And we shouldn't be taking again a political temperature of the day to see whether we should do it or not, or whether we should be allowing it or not, or whether we should be instituting it or not, or paying for people to get shots and things like that, because that serves a political purpose. It's ridiculous. So I'm going to tell you my experience, and I'll tell you why I think we could follow it through. First of all, there was a emergency plan for pandemic in Alberta. It existed, and I've read it. And if we'd have followed that and been proactive about information, I think for the most part Albertans would have been far more on side with it. But for whatever reason, they chose a different pathway to do it, right? So when it comes to health, and we're not perfect, but I think science has to lead the way. I think what we know is what we know, and we have to allow professionals to tell us how to do it. Where I change and where I say that there has to be some local input into it, I'll give you some examples. So
Okay.
when I was mayor of Brooks, we had the very worst infection rate of COVID in North America that I know of today. So over 4,400 infections per 100,000 people. So when we were going through this was early in the pandemic. There were no vaccines. There were, we only knew the basics, right? We were distancing and things were closing and things. But we didn't really explain to people what was going on. What was what we did was we informed people regularly, daily, about what was going on. We corrected misinformation. And we told them, we invited them into the conversation to say, hey, you know what? The only way for us to move past this was to band together, follow the rules, get the infection rate down so that we can have our lives back again. The problem was there was never any reward for good behavior, in my mind, that when you had places like, so we went from 4,400 per 100,000 down to 0 in about 9 weeks, if I remember right. We did that, but the city paid for isolation spaces for families that couldn't. We had a lot of proactive community help, helping people, bringing food to them so they weren't going outdoors and spreading COVID. We had lots of people step up. We had the first mass testing, so we actually understood what was going on in our community instead of speculating.
You were N95 fit testing people.
No, we were mass testing. Mass test. We tested 3,500 people in 3 days.
Oh, mass testing. Okay, gotcha.
Through a drive-through testing site. And then we were giving their information. We're very diverse community, 9 different languages. We were making sure people understood what to do if they tested positive that day. Because the AHS rate at the time, they said, well, we're at 1%. Well, the testing proved for the people that came through that we were over 9, which means we're probably 14 or 20. And once we knew that, though, people stepped up, right? The industry, the big industry, our packing plant, which is 3,000 people working at it, they stepped up. They helped community. We had multi-generational housing. Like I said, we had to provide isolation spaces for people so we could step down. We had people volunteering to babysit kids while parents went into stores. And what we didn't recognize in my mind overall is that, all the things that people were doing, if you remember it at the time, there was kind of the off and on again about how many people you could have and all of this stuff. But they kept changing the rules provincially. And there were sections of the province that were doing better at this and worse at this. You'll recall even at one time, we thought they were going down the right road. Calgary and Brooks were delayed in that one May of opening up. Yeah. May, June, the summertime, because our infections rates were higher. And myself and the mayor, we agreed with that. That made sense. We thought, okay, they're finally getting on the right track. They're going to, when the dam bursts or looks like it's going to explode, we're going to send troops in there and deal with that issue. And then when it's somewhere else, no, we didn't do that after that. We, again, a practical approach, Albertans would have understood that. They would have said, hey, you know what, our infection rate's really high. We have to do something in our area. That means, we do have to shut down things for a few days. We do have to keep the crowds down to a minimum. We can't have events. But you up there in the Northeast where you got no one's getting COVID because no one's, you don't have to deal with that. Same thing with small business and restaurants. They were the safest place to be in my community at the time. And then we didn't do the things, in my mind, again, that you have to follow, again, the science of it. Ventilation and air was a big deal. We were shutting down schools, but we weren't investing in any ways to make it safer to be in schools. Um, there was a whole bunch of stuff that we did that wasn't consistent and didn't wasn't understandable. And when something's not understandable, it's very difficult for people to adhere. And then, of course, it was always going to be over in July. It was going to be over at Stampede. It was going to be over, and we weren't being honest with people. We were. Again, I don't know the ultimate answer for this because I would hate to be, I'm never going to put myself in a situation as a leader and say, hey, under no circumstances will ever, lock down. I don't know that. Because I don't know what's coming around the corner. I think we need to be better prepared for it. Yeah. I think we have to have a process that makes sure Albertans are informed and understanding. I think we have to have rigorous infrastructure in place that actually allows us to advance that. And we have to listen to people on the ground that are saying, hey, so how can you make my community better through this?
My experience in the emergency room, the changing of rules, it was getting difficult. The frustration of the parents and the children. Wait, when can my kid go back to school? Yeah. When can I go back to work? They had no idea. Wait, I'm vaccinated, but I don't have my booster. Does that still mean 5 days or 10 days? Or is it 14 days? It was changing so frequently and so much that people had no idea what to do. And that's where a lot of the frustration came. Yeah. And I don't think the government did a very good job of delivering that information to the entire province and making sure people understood what was going on and why. Yeah. It just came out, oh, we're going to change it from 10 days to 5 days. Why? Where is this? Is this WHO? Is this the CDA? Where are you getting this information to change it from 10 days to 5 days? And then they said, well, if you're symptomatic, it has to be 10 days. Yeah. Well, what's symptomatic? Now, a nurse can tell you what symptomatic means. Is the average person going to know what symptomatic means? Probably not. If you're still coughing or tired, you're symptomatic, you go to 10 days. What ends up happening, people think like, oh, I don't have a fever anymore. I'm going to go out. You can infect other people. Yeah. And it is a complicated issue.
It is complicated, yeah. But we can only do as good as we can do. The problem is we were never given really the opportunity to do that. We spent more time again, and this is the government, I think, the government way of doing things is that if I make an announcement that's looked at proactive and I'm trying to protect you or I'm trying to let you free, whatever your messaging for the day happens to be, then you do that. We had staff at the City of Brooks working on those Thursday and Friday nights whenever they came out with the new rules, trying to understand what they meant for our citizens so that when they called and said, hey, it's, the same thing. It says I can have like 20 people under 17 in my house, but when they go outside, I can have 100. Yeah. Like, is that right? And, we had to understand all that stuff. And again, if it doesn't translate into like, why are we doing that? How does this advance our healthcare? How does this make me safer? Yeah. Then people say, forget about it. You're not paying attention to what's going on. You can't even manage your own problem. And so I think, again, but it stems from the fact that I want to make an announcement. I want to look like I'm in charge. I want to make sure that people feel like I'm doing the right thing or somehow politically I get an advantage instead of just reverting back to what's right, proper, practical. Trusting people to do the right things. And you know what? Not everybody's going to do the right thing. Yeah. Accept that. That's just life. But if we are thoughtful and considerate of people and we're paying attention and we're giving them the information they want, I think more people adhere, more people want to protect their neighbors and their friends and themselves than don't. That would fly in the face. And we could have had that, and we did for a very little while, but quickly evaporated.
How do you think Jason Kenney handled it?
I think he handled it poorly. At the beginning, he handled it very well, to be honest, because at a time, I think he was working pretty well with community leaders at the very beginning of it. Very unknown. People were kind of, informing what they knew, and I think that was informing. And I think at the time, I think the chief medical officer of health at the time seemed to have a little bit more say in terms of like what information was going out. There was a lot of information. Like if you, in my mind, I remember there was a ton of stuff going out every day, and people were starting to kind of, if you wanted to know, you could know. Yeah. And then I think as time went on, I think that started to slip away. And then decisions were made like, well, we're going to open up, and we're saying, okay, well, what's that based on? Or we're going to close down. What's that based on? Everybody has to do this. And no one understood. And I think was the decline. And then it got to the point where, political pressures and created that problem, I think, on his own. So
I don't know about you, but he always looked confused whenever he was speaking, he always looked unsure.
Well, but I think
Did
that's
you get
probably
that
true.
impression?
But and you know what? I give the leaders at the time, you know, a lot of quite a bit of rope in terms of, you know, I think people were confused.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, unless the doctor's a medical officer of health, it would be confusing. And so you have to think about who should be carrying those
Making those,
files. So it's
yeah.
making those decisions. I said last night at the launch for our candidate here in Sherwood Park, I said, you know what? The Alberta Party is smarter. We're smart. And the reason we're smart is because we recognize there's smarter people that should be doing some of these jobs.
Yeah.
And I think that's true to the point too. I think at the beginning, if you remember the beginning of the pandemic, the chief medical officers of health, because I think they were being so forward because I think they were so much ahead of the curve on information than everybody else was. They were allowed to do that, and I think people held them in reasonable consideration as a very legitimate source of information, and we should be paying attention. And then as COVID became to be a political thing versus a medical thing,
Yeah.
I think that deteriorated, and we got where we got. We have the divisions we got, and again, it's really really sad to see politicians turn a medical problem into a political either advantage for them or a disadvantage for somebody else. What we forget about what we're there for. We're there to serve people, not ourselves. And until we kind of get to that point, we're going to continue to see a lot more of these divisive issues come up because it serves people to get to their 40.
Yeah. So just to bring that back and make it one phrase. So the Alberta Party isn't against lockdowns, but you'll follow the advice of the professionals, the people who know better
Absolutely.
than the politicians.
The politicians don't know. There's the professionals, and I think communities have to be part of that conversation.
Yeah.
You know, I think we have to do it lockstep. And you know what? That's hard work. That's harder work than sitting in a room with your political advisors deciding a course of action, because you have to actually work with others that might not be your stripe, that might have different views. That's hard work. You have to do that or you get poor results.
What do you do as a leader? Let's say you meet with a group of people and they all say, I don't want a vaccine. I don't want to wear a mask. I want to go eat at my restaurant.
Yeah.
And then beside you, you have your chief medical officer, and they're saying, no, we have to lock down. But you have an overwhelming amount of people that saying, I don't want to lock down. I accept the risks. I will deal with the repercussions. As a leader, what are you going to do?
You know, so again, in absolute terms, I don't think you can answer that.
Okay.
I don't think it's fair, because you know, when I was the chair of a lodge, so seniors facility, right? Average age 87 years old, and lots of risk, right? We knew that was a high risk group.
Okay.
87 years old average age, and we came to the point where we said as a group, you know what? If you want to work here, we got to know you're negative.
Yeah.
So there's two things you can do. At the time, this is what we knew. We didn't know later on that you could still spread COVID even if you were vaccinated, right? Because of the mutations or whatever. But anyway, at the time, this is what we knew. And we said either you need to get tested to come in so that we know. Because, you know, this isn't about you. This is about protecting the people you're working for.
Exactly.
And so we always tried to come up with an option. I don't think we were very considerate of everybody's view in terms of trying to come up with an option. My mind, when it came to restaurants and bars, is that, you know, I always thought you should take on the risk. You've got the seating, you've got to know what works in your business plan, you know what the health advice is. I often said that if you followed the rules in a restaurant at the time that they were there, you know, separate tables, blah, 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 you didn't have an outbreak per se that originated there, why shouldn't you continue to operate? That was kind of my first, and I was advocating for my community, my work community, saying, you know, if they're following the rules and they're actually controlling the infection to the extent it could be controlled at that time, knowing the rules we had, isn't that all we can ask of them?
Right.
And I think there were other options. I don't think they were very explored because it was going to get messy. And guess what? It is. People are messy. For whatever reason, you don't want to take a vaccine, and I'm not going to argue with you about whether you should or shouldn't, although I think there are some instances where it's proven beyond a reasonable doubt that it has to be done. We talk about
polio,
and whatever the other ones that you take for school, right?
tetanus, diphtheria, pertussis.
That's without a doubt. I think we have to look at that and say that's absolute. You can't put you in a situation to risk an entire population because of that.
Absolutely.
Go and what's your other option? There's other options for you to go to school then, but you can't. I think we have to do that when it's beyond a reasonable doubt. I think COVID was a real test for us as people, because it was very unknown, and again, because the information started to get very, very scattered and limited the further we went into it. It's very difficult for us, and I think it proved one thing, in particular. We're better when we all are operating from the same sheet of music, that we're playing the same song, we understand what we're trying to do, and it really deteriorates quickly when we try to speak to multiple audiences about it, is that this is the rules. And I in my mind, it would be a real test. I can't imagine how difficult it was, even if you were motivated by the very best interests, to deal with it, considering no one expected it to last for 2 years plus, and going on still. So I think it's complicated, but I think at the end of the day, you've got to kind of put yourself in the front of that and say, what is the best course of action for me today, tomorrow, and stick to that. And you know what? You might not survive it politically, but let's hope your communities do. I mean, that just happens. So let's be leaders, real leaders.
Yeah. So we have, so we can transition. Let's talk a little bit about the just transition.
Oh, okay.
Transition into just transition.
Yeah.
That's a big topic right now in the news. Danielle Smith has really, really, like you said, headlines everywhere. It's killing oil and gas. It's going to destroy a province. What do you think about that?
So I think a little context is necessary to start with. So first of all, let's be true here. Oil production and oil and gas production in Alberta has steadily gone up since 2000, and I don't know, go back. It continues to rise. There's a demand for that. The industry manages that in the context of the world market, the price, the political situation. I think when it comes to transition, the fact is that the oil and gas has lost 35,000 jobs since 2014 for all kinds of reasons. Some of it's the lack of investment by companies here, but a lot of it's automation, a lot of it's efficiency. Companies are doing it differently, right? So I think that the key to a transition is that we have to recognize it's always changing. We're not extracting oil the same way we were in 1950 as we are in 2022. Oil companies are responding to their marketplace that allows them to be advantaged in their marketplace. You see, we can sit down and people a lot smarter than me can debate about whether ESG is a good thing for businesses and companies. But the fact is the market is demanding that. They want to know. The fact is that the market, when it comes to carbon-based fuels and emissions, they're demanding action. They want that to happen, and they're demanding their governments and their companies to do that. Companies aren't going to be left behind. The only thing that gets in their way in Alberta is the government of Alberta. They're the ones getting in the way. There is an opportunity here for Alberta to lead in energy. And it's not an either or conversation, it's an and conversation. The fact is, depending on who you listen to, there's going to be demand for regular, oil and gas in its traditional form. Some are saying it'll peak at 2035. Some say it's going to peak at 2040. Some, they're somewhere in there. Yeah. But it's going to rise for the next little while because that's just where we are. And the companies are being, the companies that are going to be advantaged are the ones that are reducing their emissions. So then you look at what is the government's role in allowing our industry to lead. And there's two things it is. One is regulation.
Okay.
And one is making sure that their investments are protected. I've talked to large industries in Alberta, and we talk about, how affordability affects us. So why don't we have more thermal-based power as an example? Well, the reason we do is because the carbon capture side of it, there's no certainty. You spend $1 billion on a plant to create electricity for us, and that stabilizes the grid. But they know that they're trying to get to net zero by 2030, which, by the way, I don't think is realistic in the electrical grid. But they're trying to get to net zero. The only way they can do that is with carbon capture. The technology exists, but that's a significant investment. Right now, there's no jurisdiction in Alberta that's guaranteed a price on carbon. Now, in the United States, who we always seem to make fun of environmentally from here, they have a 12-year, my understanding is they have a 12-year guarantee on the price of carbon for companies that are investing in carbon capture. So now they see a horizon for payback. So if we were to provide that, and what industry wants in order to move us through into continuing to be the energy leader, I think we are, is they just need certainty. And what they don't want is they don't want one government saying we're going to do this all the way over here, move the needle to no taxes or no carbon tax or no this or no that, to one that says, oh, we're going to do this and double and triple it. They can deal with whatever situation they are. Industry's way more nimble and adaptable than government is. But they just need to know.
Yeah.
I've run into a lot of leaders in the industry, people that are waiting for the opportunities to get this done, and they're asking just for certainty, regulatory certainty, and price certainty on the carbon capture side. And I think those two things should be done tomorrow. And they'll do what we need to do, and we will get renewables. We'll find ways to turn bitumen into other products. They'll do that because it'll be profitable for them, and it'll serve their shareholders. But if our jurisdiction is uncertain about the base level things, about the regulation piece, about the price of things, they'll move to jurisdictions where there is certainty that makes sense. So arguing about whether Trudeau makes his political statement that he's serving his base by saying we're really committed to climate change action, and this is how we're going to do it. He's I don't know what his people are telling him. Maybe he lives in a world that no one else. The facts speak for themselves. Yeah. This isn't going to happen tomorrow. I don't care how much money you pour into it.
Elon Musk himself, the guy who owns Tesla. He's a massive promoter of renewable energies. He was on Joe Rogan podcast. He talked about it overly. He's like, he said, we still need oil and gas. We still need it's not going to go away. The thing is that we should be investing in renewable energy to lead us towards that future. Obviously, we cannot go to 100% renewable energy tomorrow. No. Everyone still has petrol cars. Everyone still has combustion engines, especially industry, like I said, the electrical grid, everything. We need oil and gas. This net zero by 2030 is crazy.
Yeah. It's impossible financially. You and I couldn't afford power if they tried to do that.
What's the rush?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the big thing is what is the rush? Why don't we just focus? I think myself, especially when I hear carbon emissions and the environment, 100% carbon emissions wants to keep our CO2 emissions down. But the other thing I want to hear more of is protecting our lakes. Alberta's lakes are filled with blue-green algae almost all year round. There's maybe a half a dozen lakes. The fishing in the lakes has gone down. When I was a kid, I'd go fishing for perch, walleye, whatever. Remember, you could keep 2 or 3 walleye a person, I think. Yep. Now you need tags. We have what about our environment? And the thing as well is this federal carbon tax. It's been in place for how many years now? 2 years?
Yeah. 2 or 3.
2 or 3,
3
years.
Yeah.
Where's the money?
Yeah.
Why don't we have a solar farm outside Fort Saskatchewan? We must have paid so much carbon tax. Why is my utility bill not being supplemented by a solar farm financed by the government from all this carbon tax they've taken?
So those are really good areas. So first of all, on the carbon tax, so so there's 2 levels, right? There's the industrial level, and then there's the consumer level. So one of the things that we would do, the Alberta Party would do, is we would repatriate the carbon levy. The courts have ruled we have to have one, right? Because of whatever. We would repatriate it and redo it to Alberta's advantage. So, taking it back and then, we have rebates going. We'd make sure the right people got the right rebates, and then if there was if there was, all the money should go back. Because at the base level, it doesn't matter. You have to drive to work. You have to do those things. You have to heat your house. None of those things should be a penalty in terms of that. You can't avoid that, right? Yeah. So on those things, that money should be going back. First of all, it just should. It just doesn't make sense. When it comes to things, and then whatever, if there was any left over, which I anticipate there wouldn't be anyway, I think it would be a net zero in terms of the rebate back and forth, which again speaks to how efficient it actually is and whether that's the right way to go. Yeah. That's a debate for another day, but we are stuck with it. The courts have said we've got to apply one. It's legal. So how do we do it best to advantage Alberta? And the best way to do that is to repatriate, take control of it, and then use it for Alberta's advantage to whatever that happens to be. We haven't fully fleshed that out, but we certainly think that for those situations where you can't avoid the tax, you can't moderate your behavior in order to avoid the tax, because that's kind of what the design is. There's better solutions for that. So secondly, and then when it comes to the rest of the environment, for instance, on coal, the Alberta Party has said, we accept the founding of the coal group that really rallied against coal mining in the Eastern Slopes. So that has to stop. Would we say stop forever? I don't know. Maybe in 100 years, somebody will figure out a way to get the coal out and use it for something. Yeah. But for now, there's none. When it comes to the other thing is we got to reinvest again. Reinvesting now for the future is something that a lot of governments have shied away from. And I think it's based on one thing in particular. One is where do we prioritize our spending? Albertans care about going fishing. They care about their lakes, and they care about their prairies, and they care about their forests. I know people that those departments continually to get cut. They continue to lose people. There's continual lack of investment in those areas. What are we doing about it? So that's one thing. We have to make sure that we're prepared to deal with that. It's one of Alberta's calling cards, our supposed pristine environment, which, like you said, is you're speaking to the degradation of it in several areas. How do we reinvest and get that realized again? Secondly, is that we have to go back to what the wealth of the province was created on, and there's some detrimental effect there too. And I think we have to look at how does the polluter contribute and how do they actually mitigate? And I think we've had some rules in place that we haven't enforced. I don't think we've been smart enough to adapt and deal with companies that create situations for us that cause this long-term damage. And we have to be tougher on that because there's a long-term game to be played here. And and again, I think industries understand it, but their industry also has a different master than we do. Yeah. Their master is to make sure they're maximizing their return. And if they have to invest in dealing with the bad effects of the industry they have, that takes away from the bottom line. They have to deal with that. But I think there's a place for that. I think the polluter has to pay in Alberta along a whole bunch of lines. I think there's areas in production, and it doesn't matter what industry, in coal or oil and gas extraction. I think that we've got a plan in place. We just don't enforce it. We don't deal with it, and it's creating some long-term effects. And again, people are going to tell us what they want, and the government is for that purpose, right? And sometimes you're going to have to tell them, for instance, maybe in parks and environment, hey, there aren't enough people on the ground to do this right. We're going to have to invest in this. This is going to cost you more money. Do you want? That
seems like a great use of carbon tax money.
Yeah, there you go. and I think that's in fact how we have to proceed. Those aren't going to be, the podium politics for something like that. They're not highly valuable. To be honest, they're not highly valuable. In the middle of a term to say we're going to spend more money on this. Because of that, because again, you're not going to have all of a sudden all your lakes be cleaned up in a matter of weeks. You're not going to have all the well sites reclaimed, and back to its original state in a matter of days or weeks. This is a long-term problem with a long-term solution. But like I said before, when it comes to like healthcare, when it comes to anything, we got to start now and do the right thing, because delaying it's only causing us problems. And the Alberta Party isn't pretending we have every answer to every question, because we don't. When it comes right down to it, I don't even, some of the solutions that we're proposing might not be workable even in a short term or a longer term basis. But I think our thinking about it is right. We're saying the problem isn't something that we can fix tomorrow. So why stand there and say you can? Let's be at least honest about that point and say, hey, this is going to take us a while, and we need you to work with us. You help us get there. And I've like I said, when I toured around the province and I've heard some of these issues, particularly around blue-green algae, because I visited a lot of summer villages and things like that are dealing with, they've had solutions on the books sometimes for 30 years. things they could do to mitigate this or to make it better that have never been
And
acted on or invested in.
the local economies of these small towns, Boyle, Lac La Biche, all the lakes, especially in the summertime, is where their economy flourishes. You These blue green algae, like you can't go swimming, so it's like your recreational time as an Albertan's decrease. Like you just have to stay at home, watch more TV. Your economies in those local, municipalities are suffering, and it just goes on and on.
Yeah.
And the blue green algae really annoys everyone.
Yeah, because it's again, it's something that could be mitigated, right? We know runoff causes the problem. We know where the pollution comes from or the issues come from, and we don't mitigate it. And again, it's someone is going to pay because they haven't paid for a while in one way or the form. The activity is going to be tempered, or but at the end, over the long term, we're going to get what we need to get out of this. And I I always I tell people that when I tour the province, there's and this again comes back to kind of what we talked about at the beginning, why I'm doing provincial politics and instead of staying with municipal politics. Um, I could go to a community a year ago, and they would have a problem, whatever it was, pipe in the ground, building issue, whatever it was. They were trying to get an industry off the ground, whatever. If the municipality itself or the group of municipalities were the only ones that had all the levers, I could go back a year later and see action. Either the problem solved or they've got a plan and they're moving on it. If that problem involved another level of government, either the province or the federal government, almost without question, I could go back year later, and they'd still be dealing with the province or the feds. Either regulatory, either the way they put out money, the way they deal with grants or priorities, right? Waiting.
Yeah.
And this comes back to my other point why I'm here is that I think there's opportunities to take advantage of the incredible resource that's in communities, in local areas, to get some of these things advanced. And one of the things the province has to recognize is that, you know what, if you're the funder of it, then you should get out of the way. You don't need to hold on to everything yourself. You don't have to centralize everything. You don't have to make everything the same across the province. Communities are more than capable enough of solving problems on their own. They're just asking you to contribute in whatever way you want and then get out of the way of doing it. Yeah. That's what Albertans want. We're good at it. But we've seen successive governments, and it doesn't matter whether you're the NDP or the Conservatives. Conservatives are supposed to espouse a smaller government unless I haven't seen that happen. We have a cabinet twice the size it used to be. We have massive premier's office, like what I think 34, 35 people. What it was, it might to get a piece of paper through 35 people.
There's 35 people.
That's what I understand. I think her office is about 34, 35 staff.
For
the premier. That's what I get. I think I heard that when they were trying to, do the email thing about who has emails for influencing what or whatever.
Could you imagine the amount of work you could get done with a workforce of 35 people?
Yeah. I was told at one time, and I take this for what it is. It's what I heard. When I was president of AUMA, we often wrote letters to cabinet ministers and the premier about issues that our members had voted on or were wanting to take forward. And specific outlines. And my understandings was that it went through 6 hands before it got back to us. So to me, right away, you're going, okay, well, how efficient are we? I know as president of AUMA, we made offers through red tape reduction to significantly reduce red tape in a very tangible way and by tangible I mean not removing words on the paper.
Yeah.
I mean actually removing time from an effort or a cost from an effort, and we were never ever contacted back again to do anything. And this is why we're doing it, because I don't think the province is serious about getting better and getting out of people's lives.
So I want to ask you quickly so we can transition topics a little bit. Equalization payments, Quebec, Ontario. That's another polarizing topic we have in politics today. It's driving force a lot of people going to the ballots. Danielle Smith against equalization payments. They wanted essentially the federal government to force the pipelines through the eastern provinces to be able to accept their money. Kind of where do you stand on that? What do you think about it? What plans would you have to push it so that we could get those pipelines through? And do you think it's fair that they are getting this money. Essentially just
Yep.
take
So
away.
so on 2 points. I think first of all, when you force anybody to do anything, as we've talked about today,
Yeah.
you don't get a very good result. It's never good. And I think, you know, when I was president of AUMA again, we did a program called Support Canadian Energy, where the Western and actually Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Alberta, BC even was involved in it. We went to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, which is the national body convention in Quebec, and our goal was to talk to municipal politicians there.
How'd it go?
It went well.
It went well.
It went well.
Wow.
And for two reasons, I'll tell you why. Because one, they didn't know how important energy was for us, and they didn't even know how important energy was for them, in the sense that they don't have that conversation. Oil and gas and the energy industry is daily conversation for us as Albertans. It just has. It's driven our economy. It's allowed us to have a pretty impressive standard of living. And you know, in Quebec, for instance, I remember talking to a mayor of a community just north of Montreal where the Energy East pipeline was supposed to go through. And I'm only telling you what he told me, but they had initially supported the route that was there in their community, and then the route changed without consultation. So and so they rallied against it. That's why you saw the big political, from his perspective at least, and that's a small rural community outside of Montreal that said, no, you're not crossing our river that way, or our whatever it was, body of water. So there was some misunderstandings there, and I think the conversation about energy overall, again, doesn't serve a political purpose for the Prime Minister of a country to talk about energy security in Quebec the way we need it, with the practical need of it, just like it isn't for us. And so, so for us as the Alberta Party, we would be working with the provinces, because there are provinces and territories, and the Prime Minister and the federal government, they each have kind of sometimes, unfortunately, conflicting goals when they shouldn't be. So I think there is a pathway to getting this done. There's corridors that already exist. There's opportunities for us to change the conversation instead of using it as a weapon. I mean, how many times have you heard premiers in Alberta in the last couple of years, you know, say it's not our fault, it's their fault?
I think they start every sentence like that.
And that's not and to agree, don't get me wrong, they have a say.
Yeah.
Would we as Albertans appreciate if Quebec said to us, hey, by the way, we're just going to run this power line through so we can sell electricity to BC or Washington State or Alaska? We just, hey, by the way, just, you have to do it. 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 I can tell you that we wouldn't like it either. However, if there was a different way to talk about that, but there isn't right now, and I think that's leadership, lack of it, and we would be advocating for a much different model. When it comes to equalization, you know, I think we have to understand that we pay more income tax because we make more in Alberta.
Yep.
And we can kind of argue about, and I think that there are some problems with the formulas for equalization. I think we saw it in the energy price drop that we had. I don't think it's responsive enough. It doesn't deal with the unique needs of Alberta and Newfoundland in particular when it comes to market conditions for our primary industry. I don't think we can respond quick enough to that. So I think there's some things that need to be fixed. But you know, I don't know enough about how, you know, I've seen kind of these massive formulas and people trying to explain to me why Quebec gets what they want, gets what they get out of that, and how they move. But they also, do we want everything Quebec wants, to be fair? They have the highest taxes.
You know, I lived there for almost 4 years.
Yeah.
And a big driving force why I came back is the provincial income tax in Quebec is 10% higher than in Alberta.
Yeah.
The wages for nursing. When I left there, I had, I think, 6 or 7 job offers. Like, that's how bad the situation was when I left 5-6 years ago now.
Okay.
And the starting salary I would receive there was about $23-24 an hour, plus 10% more income tax.
Right.
It was just unbelievable. It was not sustainable to live there as a young individual starting out their career, paying off student debt.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing too. I want to ask
Yeah,
you.
no, I got some views there.
So the Canadian government has foregone the interest rates for federal student repayments.
Yeah.
Alberta has not done that yet.
Yeah, should be done tomorrow.
Okay.
It's an affordability thing. I talked a little bit about access to post-secondary. We have to lower the total cost of post-secondary to attend. And again, that's an investment that we have to make. We have to make it. I don't know what that looks like in terms of whether you make tuitions lower or you invest more in universities or how that is, but we have lots of work to do there. But accessibility for students to get into university or training of any kind is we have to do a better job of that.
Yeah.
We claim we want that, but we don't. Again, we haven't done a bunch. We've just, the costs have gone up. And again, education's not political in the sense that we should be mandating what people learn or how they learn it. What we should be doing is empowering individuals to get the education they need at the price point they can afford to get in it. I don't know, I'm not for like free education. I don't think I'm there, although there's some compelling arguments for it. But I am on the other side saying that if you've got the ambition and you have the high school grades to get into a field of study, and the only thing that's holding you back is the cost of admission, we have to fix that. There's got to be a way for that to not be the gate.
I don't think the cost of tuition on itself, $8,000 a year, not terrible.
Yeah.
So is that $34,000 for a degree for 4 years? In terms, it depends what program you're going into. Obviously, if you're going into arts and your, employment opportunities are going to be, not like in the $20, $30 an hour range. It's going to be a little difficult. But as a nurse, an engineer, as a physician, or as a dentist, the student loan programs make it quite easy to get that money. But the cost of living and being unable to work while you're in school, that's where the cost is.
Yeah.
4 years of unemployment with living wage, as you know, inflation's gone crazy. 3 bell peppers, I think, is like $7.99 now.
Yeah.
You're talking about spending probably $2,500 a month is a reasonable student budget with your rent, utilities, cell phone, internet, food, and outings.
Yeah.
So what is that? $30,000. That becomes $40,000 a year you're spending with your tuition. $160,000 a year. $160,000 you'll spend through your degree program.
Yeah.
So when the University of Alberta, the residents there, I thought it was expensive initially. It was $500 a month.
Yeah.
That's cheap. When I went there, it was like, they want me to live in a hotel for $500 a month. That's ridiculous. It should be like $250. I went to McGill in Montreal, $11.50 a month.
Yeah.
The residence there was $11.50 a month, and you had to get the food options, which is in the thousands of dollars a month.
Yeah.
Tuition on itself, I don't think needs to change, but the loan program that you get, there should be more grants, and the interest, you shouldn't be charging your citizens interest for the pursuit of education and industries where you're desperately needing them.
Yeah.
We need nurses. We should not be asking student nurses to pay interest on their loans. Like, people should be we should have people lining out the door to nursing school.
Yeah.
And I want to call it Jagmeet Singh. Can we call it Jagmeet Singh a little bit? Do you know what his plan for student loans was? Do you remember?
I don't know. I didn't.
He wanted to take $20,000 away, up to $20,000 from every individual with a federal student loan.
Just wash it away.
Wash it away. That was quite enticing. Okay, so what's he do? Him and the Liberals, they have what is called a confidence agreement.
Yeah.
Not a coalition, but they have a confidence agreement. What did he do with that? I don't know. Absolutely nothing. Jagmeet Singh got absolutely nothing out of that deal. I think the fact that he's still the leader of that party.
Yeah, it makes you wonder.
It makes me wonder. He has this big voice. He talked a really big game. He went the podium politics.
Yeah.
He's very good at podium politics. Action, nothing.
Yeah.
He didn't do anything.
Yeah, and I think for whatever levers the provincial government has, as long as it makes it more affordable for people to do it, I think. And I don't know. I think my goal is we've looked at numbers and my daughter's a teacher, married to a teacher, and She's in her 10th year now, so she's just kind of getting under that mountain of cost, and it was significant when she was done. But it is affordability, and how do you deal with affordability? Like whether the entry point's cheaper, whether I'm not exactly sure exactly how it would work, but the government has to recognize that it in order for it to make proper investments, make sure the people are getting into the areas of study they want to, and then are producing for Alberta and Canada, wherever they end up producing. Hopefully, is most of them in Alberta. We've got to address it, and we think like you need to reduce the overall cost of a post-secondary education by upwards to 50% somehow. Whether that's get rid of interest costs, whether that's investing in universities so the cost of living's less, whatever it happens to be. Those things we have to make a consideration for that, because again, finances shouldn't be a barrier for you to become a much more productive citizen.
Yeah, and it is when I was at the University of Alberta, the biggest thing were student jobs. They wanted you to work for free. There was this huge culture, especially in sciences, where they had all these research laboratories. The professors did not want to pay you.
Right.
There was an expectation that you would work for free. That creates a huge barrier for people who already have difficulty affording university.
Right.
And this volunteering, this laboratory work, you almost need it on your resume to get into professional programs, dentistry, pharmacy, medicine.
Okay.
And it was
so there's just not enough time in the day to get the rest of the job done, right? Get your schoolwork done, do your volunteering, and then by the time you need a paying money. Job, not there. Yeah.
So I did kind of a survey with friends and family about the Alberta Party.
Okay.
One question I asked them: do you know what it is?
Yeah.
Most people said yes, they're aware of you. And if I said, do you know where they sit in the political spectrum? The most common answer was far right.
Okay, fair enough. We're not doing a very good job there.
I think it's to do with the name.
Yeah.
Everyone knows Alberta is associated with conservatives.
Yeah.
So they intuitively think if they know nothing about the Alberta Party, a party named the Alberta Party must be conservative, far right-winged. And I've done some research, so I know you're not there.
Yeah.
But what do you say, like, where you sit on the spectrum?
So always people want to put a label on everything, and I get that. That makes it simple, and I can only say this, we're in the spectrum. We're in the middle, and we're in the middle based on kind of three things. One is we are fiscally responsible. We really do believe that the services you get, we should be paying for. That should be run at zero. Like there's no reason for you to get a service that you've kind of agreed is a priority and not pay for it through however means, whether it's fees, taxes. We think you have to get value for money, and that it's up to us to make sure we're not running deficits, that we're actually paying as we go, so that we're not burdening another generation with poor spending decisions or poor revenue decisions we made before. Because in Alberta, we have not balanced a budget without resource revenue since the early 80s. That's the fact. And, resource revenue has been a gift to us that we've not, to be honest, managed very well. Secondly, we're very socially aware that education, healthcare, and social services, support services are important. And the reason they're important is because they set the stage for us to be better than we were before. And any deterioration in any of those makes us worse than we were before. I don't know of a single Albertan that I've ever met that says, oh, yeah, those cuts or the lack of investment, and you tell them, hey, by the way, Alberta will be worse if we keep down this road. None of them say, let's be worse. They all want us to be better. So we're very aware of that. And then thirdly, got lost in my statement there. Thirdly, I think the Alberta Party is people first. Is that the reason government exists is for people. The reason that you exist, the reason that I think most people are motivated to be part of government is to serve people. I don't say that stays, and I see we've got lots of examples where they're not serving people.
Yeah.
But I think the Alberta Party's principle is that you have to serve people. So your education system has to serve people. How does it do that? The healthcare system has to serve people. How does it do that? And the structure itself, if it doesn't serve that purpose, has to be changed. You have to change the rules. You got to be willing to make those kinds of changes to stay on mission. Because if you veer off mission in any grand way, which I think we've done in both those areas, and even social services as well, we lose the impact and we make Alberta worse. We're talking about taking care of people will make us better in the future, and it's pretty simple. So when we talk about spectrum, there are, we don't think the UCP and the NDPR are enemies in any way, shape, or form. In fact, some of the ideas they come up with and some of the initiatives they talk about would fit right into what the Alberta Party's talking about solutions. The difference for us versus the NDP and the UCP is we're not stuck there. We're not stuck on, like I said to you before, I'm not pretending that I know all the solutions. I know what I want for an outcome,
Yeah.
but I don't know all of the mechanisms for that. And that there's mechanisms all over the place. And we have to be pragmatic about it. And it's not sexy. It's not very sexy for him. I'm going to stand up and do this, and I'm going to give everybody this, and I'm going to invest billions in that. I'm not here to tell you that. I'm here to tell you we can do things better if we work together. And that means having a more practical approach. It isn't sexy, unfortunately. I wish it was sexy because I think people would know a little bit more about the Alberta Party.
Just how polarized politics is right now, and how, you listen to Danielle Smith, and I feel like she sold her soul sometimes. Like, she is so driven to drive home, no more lockdowns. It's kind of like, people are tired of politicians speaking like politicians. We do want people in leadership who are still people, who aren't afraid to have an opinion that is contrary to what their party's political opinion is. Because you can't sell yourself out to join a political party and still expect to be a good leader, my opinion.
Yeah. And I think that's the Alberta Party's mantra when you look at what we're talking about. If you look at the candidates we've collected, and there's a lot more coming right now, but if you talk to them, there's a few things we ask for candidates. Like, are you really committed to your community? Do you really understand and committed to it? And are you willing to advocate for them? So the Alberta Party is saying no whipped votes. And some people have said to me, well, Barry, that's not manageable. In a parliamentary democracy, you have to be able to whip votes in order to get things done. And I go, have you ever tried it?
Yeah.
Have you ever tried it? None of them have ever tried it. And I think good ideas rise. I think people get behind good ideas and good initiatives because it's beneficial for them politically too.
You don't want to have an intelligent person elected to Parliament or Legislative Assembly, and then be afraid to speak their could be amazing ideas because they don't think that people are going to get behind them.
Yeah.
You don't want to silence the people that you elect.
Nope.
That's the exact opposite of electing people into a government.
Right. And who does the electing, right? And this is where we've changed. If you've seen the structures change, they become very centralized. They decide who to run. They kick people out they don't like, that has an idea on the edge of their, an edge of their acceptance, right? They don't like that person, so now all of a sudden they're not eligible to be even in the nomination contest, right? The Alberta Party, we've got boundaries, and I love how Carrie Kundal always brings us up, our candidate in Calgary Elbow. She says, we're a big tent with hard walls. We don't allow any hate, racism, gender phobias of any kind. We don't allow that to happen. However, up to that spectrum, we allow people to have views on family, views on education, views on healthcare, views on social services, views on drinking and driving, whatever they happen to be, they're allowed to do that. But in an open forum, with, again, the end goal being serving the people of Alberta, I think it is doable. It happens in municipal politics all the time. I've been part of that. So I think the change in politics is necessary. And to your point about that people have changed, I think they have, is because it's become how do we make sure that we benefit at the next electoral cycle? And that means, we crush out any things that can create problems for us.
How many people are you going to have on the ballots?
I think we're going to have a person on every ballot. I really do. We've had, we opened up nominations broadly across all the unfilled positions. here in the beginning of February. We've got a lot of inquiries. Like I think the last count was over 70 for people to run. So I don't think we're going to have a problem. So I think there'll be an Alberta Party candidate for everybody to vote for. Realistically, when we look at the election going forward, I think Alberta has an opportunity to have their first minority government ever. If all things being equal, I think it's very tough. Going to be tough to get a majority. And I think if the Alberta Party holds a balance of power, I think you can see some of this politics change. Because the people that we're electing, the candidates that are running for us, are very committed on those principles and will govern that way.
Where are you going to run?
That's a really good question, because I have not ultimately decided. I would love to be running at home, but I mean, realistically, is that the best thing for the party to run against the premier? It seems the premier is going to be running there again, and that might not be the best thing for the Alberta Party. So stay tuned. I'll have an announcement to make in the next few weeks.
Do you have someone running in Fort? Do you have a candidate in Fort Sask-Vegreville?
We've had some inquiries here as well, but no, we don't at this point. We do not have one yet. But so we're looking for one. So if you're interested, the job's open.
I might be interested.
There you go.
I think the other thing, it's a good time now for the Alberta Party. The polarization of NDP versus the UCP allows an opportunity for a middleman to kind of come in and say, hey, this is our vision, this is what we want to do, and to be heard.
Yeah.
I think it's difficult. I was looking at, now this is Wikipedia.
Yeah.
So the last Alberta Party member that was elected, who won, the time they lost, their budget, it said, was $7,000 versus the UCP was $30,000.
Yeah.
Now, I think marketing, getting your voice heard, is a difficult challenge, especially if you don't have the opportunity to market. I'm not super familiar with the rules in terms of how much you're allowed to spend per candidate and why.
Yeah.
Is there any truth to that?
Yeah.
Did that UCP candidate have more than 3 times
I think
the
they
budget?
spent a lot more. So right now the rules allow on an individual constituency, you're allowed to spend a little over $50,000 if you want. You can spend up to $50,000, and then the party provincially is allowed to spend another amount. I can't remember what that is, but it's in the millions if you want. So on an individual basis, though, you're capped at right around 53,000. So, but I've seen campaigns win and lose with a lot less than that. But the rules are there. There is maximums you can spend.
It's kind of it's difficult to come to terms with the amount of money a party might have could influence if they get elected.
Yeah, and it certainly does. Yeah, there's lots of people say money influences politics, and that's been one of the struggles too. I think there's for the Alberta Party to we've kind of had ups and downs over the last year on collecting money. And it's unfortunately, the reality is people don't want to be seen supporting us because of kind of some of the vindictiveness that happens in Alberta politics when they see your name. So, once you give us more than an X amount of dollars, you're published on the lists on Elections Alberta. And some people don't want to be seen supporting that because they're worried about how that affects their lives in other ways. And I think that's unfortunate, but that's the reality we're in, is that for us to get the message out, you need money to get the message out. But I am very much committed to a change in politics that allows strong voices and for people to be heard for what they were, and that allows them to stay committed to their mission, which is to unselfishly serve the population that elects them. And if we deviate from that, then we're no better than the other two, in my mind. And then we have to stick to that. And that if we aren't as successful electorally on that basis, then so be it. I think the group that's around the Alberta Party and the candidates that are rising are committed to a better way of doing politics, and that will ultimately serve Alberta.
Yeah, I think so too. There's one more thing I want to ask you about, but I think we should take a small break.
Okay.
Refresh our coffees. I think the cameraman wants to talk to us.
Okay.
And then we'll come back and we'll just have that one more topic and maybe wrap things up.
Okay, sounds good.
Is that okay, Jerry? Hear that? Okay, cut. Well, Barry, thanks for coming back.
Yeah, no, this has been awesome. I've had a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a fun thing to do, and I think just the press conferences, you don't get to really get to know the people that are speaking. They have this, like the PSAs Trudeau does.
Yeah.
How fake are those?
Yeah, no, I agree.
So this is a good opportunity to hear your opinions, you to think through them, and really just get to know you as a candidate.
And I appreciate the effort that's being made.
So last thing, Alberta Provincial Police Force.
Yeah. So no need for it. We're opposed to it. We think the RCMP do a fine job. Does it need improvement? Absolutely. But we're going about it the wrong way. We're going to spend $300 million plus on a transition. That's what they think it'll cost. They somehow seem to claim that we're going to better coverage for less money or the same money, and that municipalities aren't going to have to pay. Everything costs, everybody pays. Let's not forget that. And then, first of all, let's remember what we're trying to do. Again, it's been our focal point for our conversation. What are we trying to achieve with policing? We're trying to make sure communities are safe. People feel safe in communities in Alberta. They want to move here, raise their families, and stay here. That's happening already. We can use some help and we can use some new initiatives, but that can all happen within the structures. There's no use to spend a lot of money. We've got bigger problems that we talked about earlier.
Could you see a future where, rather than kicking the RCMP out and completely transitioning to provincial police, but rather also having a provincial police work with the RCMP, essentially just expanding the scope of the people we already have, like the sheriffs, the people at the way stations, I apologize, I forget the job description, and the fish and wildlife officers.
Like commercial police officers.
Yeah.
I don't know what the final formula looks like. I just know that to, propose or say that the RCMP are controlled by Ottawa. First of all, that is a lie. Like, I won't even mince words. It's a lie. They're under contract to the province of government of Alberta, and they are governed by the province of Alberta. And when they're contracted to individual communities, they're contracted to that individual community to provide community police services. Yeah. So yes, and there are federal officers already in Alberta that are RCMP that do federal initiatives. They work jointly together. So let's lay it out on the table. They're not controlled by Ottawa. They're controlled by local communities and the provincial government who run those contracts. So that's the truth of it. Going forward, I don't know. That might be the best way to go. When we're trying to deal with a safety issue, it might be that, we expand the sheriff's department. It might be that fish and wildlife is expanded because that's the issue. It might be commercial police. I'm not sure. But to predispose, like say, this is the answer, to get rid of the RCMP and we'll have better policing, that is a fabrication. That is just not true. They don't know that. And even if they did, then don't lie about the cost. So either way, we're just what we're supposed to be doing again. What's best for Albertans? We should be providing value for money and providing them the service they need. And we don't need to spend that much more resource on policing.
$300 million seems like not a lot of money.
Yeah, I don't think it's enough.
But I can't remember the cost of Connect Care in hospitals. Do you know off the top of your head?
Was over $2 billion.
So how is it possible that we're going to implement an entire police force for $300 million and implementing a computer software cost $2 billion?
Yeah, it does not make sense. You look at the Surrey example that's been politically bounced around. Now this last council in Surrey has been, 4 out of I think a majority of them want to get rid of the transition back to a Surrey-owned police. Again, that's what happens when you take a service that should be on a operational basis. Experts should be telling you how it's designed, how it's implemented, how it works, and then politics gets inserted into the conversation and becomes the predominant way you make decisions. You end up with messes like that, and the Alberta Provincial Police idea is just the same. It's a politically driven agenda. It's not a practically driven agenda. It's meant to say a message rather than deliver a service. And we're the opposite. We want to deliver the service. The message will be in that, hey, Alberta Party, you did a good job. The RCMP did a good job. We're happy with our service. Let's move on to the next thing. That's the most important thing for us. Yeah. And that's the difference.
Listen to the key stakeholders, the experts, use their advice to build something that works, rather than taking your biased opinion that's driven off of politics and getting votes and then creating something out of that.
Yep, that's exactly who we are. That's how our approach is. We want to take experts, trust Albertans, and trust professionals. Let them do their job as they understand it, what they were trained for, and we'll have better outcomes. I really believe that.
Great. You know, we could talk for 2 more hours, especially on nursing topics. There's so much I could talk
I
about.
can see the passion, which is awesome. And this is where we learn things. I learned a lot of things today about the nursing particularly. That's going to help inform our policy and my attitudes and my work going forward. And I think that's what we need to do as politicians is speak to people who are on the front lines, understand what they're trying to accomplish, what they could accomplish. Yeah. And empower them. I think the possibilities are endless if we can somehow get our heads wrapped around that concept.
Did Brooks have a Brooks Informed Facebook page?
Yes, in terms of yes, yeah, we had our
You can learn a lot about municipal politics based off of the informed pages on Facebook.
Yes,
the Fort Saskatchewan one is filled, especially with comments on the hospital in town, things like that. But anyways, I guess we'll. Do you have any closing remarks?
You know what? I just want to say I think we need to do more of this type of conversation. I think Albertans are smart and thoughtful, and if we treat them as such, I think we'll get better outcomes. And I think the Alberta Party's committed to that thoughtful conversation. And I hope that when the candidates are coming out, that people have a look at them, measure them for what they're worth, what they're talking about, and start to vote for something that'll enhance your community. And let's worry less about the fear that's going on that if the NDP win, the world will come to the end, that if the UCP win, the world will come to the end. That won't be the case. But I think the Alberta Party's an option for you to make it better. And so I hope they would consider us on that basis.
Well, time will tell, and not much time at all.
No, happen quickly.
So again, thanks for coming. And if you have any other, members of your party that you want to come and be on this podcast, send them my way.
Absolutely, I will.
I would love to talk to them and, have some enticing conversations and really see what makes them good candidates and maybe, let their ridings know why they should vote for them.
Thanks a lot, Brendon. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.